Alabama 34, Florida State 17. Excuse me, flip that. That's wrong. Florida State 31, Alabama 17. That is not how it went. Alabama would have loved if it was the first way that I said it.
But that's okay, Richard. Like, I am still shocked it went that way based on how this offseason went.
I
get it, man. I'm still very surprised by how that
went. I guess they just had our guy Matt Zenitz out at wide receiver instead of Ryan Williams. That might have been why there were all those drops.
Matt Zenitz is obviously the faster of those two people. John Talty, who is with us this morning, had a tremendous column last night on the game, and he had a nugget in there from Brian Griffin, the former Maryland chief of staff, about Kalen DeBoer's staff when they were at Washington. And I quote, "I don't even know if those guys knew what the word pressure was. I think they were living this fantasy of, here we are, we're going to win games. Let me show you the locker room. Everything was so casual and peaceful. I remember thinking to myself, God, these guys got it great. There's no pressure here." John, there is now pressure in Tuscaloosa. There wasn't any in Seattle, but there's pressure now.
Yeah, and I think this is something that people felt from when he decided to leave Washington to come to Alabama. Not only are you leaving what, as Brian described, was a great situation there. I mean, they had that thing rolling, took it to a national championship game. As I wrote in the story yesterday, he was going to make a lot of money to stay at Washington. He would have made $9.2 million, so a little bit less than he's making at Alabama, but still an incredible amount of money. And he didn't have to deal with the pressure of following the greatest of all time, Nick Saban. But he wanted it. This is what he signed up for. And you're seeing right now him faltering under that pressure. I mean, he's never experienced anything like he is going to feel this week and moving forward coming off of this loss. And it raises real questions, I think, about the fit at Alabama. I think anybody who knows Kalen DeBoer, who has talked to Kalen DeBoer, will tell you he's a really nice guy, a little friendlier than the guy who was in that job before him. Really smart offensive mind. Again, he had success at multiple different places, but it hasn't translated to Alabama right now. And it's going to get tricky here because you look at the schedule, and we can get to that later, but there's a lot of hard games left on the slate. And when you add that plus all of the offseason hype that was coming out of Tuscaloosa, it's just a stunning defeat. I mean, I can tell you, I was in Clemson's press box, was planning on, hitting the Clemson tailgate scene, seeing some friends, things like that. Didn't get any of that. I was glued to the TV and having to write a column about Alabama that I was not anticipating. And that's, just shows how wild I think that this result was. I didn't even think to go to that game. To me, it wasn't even a top 3-4 game of the weekend in some ways. And here it is now. It's the number one thing we're talking about.
I wrote a whole column this offseason basically being like, I love the rankings because it tells us that Alabama, Florida State isn't a real game that you have to care about. Like this was not supposed to be a really competitive matchup, as obviously if you watched our Thursday show, obviously we got well into that. But this is one of the things that's so interesting. And John, obviously you've been around Bama for a while and been around the SEC for a while. I mean, like, it's rarely a question of like, can this guy coach football, right? Like no doubt Kalen DeBoer is a very good football coach. He's won a lot of games. He's one of the greatest winning percentages that we've ever seen, going back from NAIA to all the way to leading Washington to the national title game. But like, when the difference so much of the time is just all those external things, right? It's the external pressures. It's the external stuff that your players have to deal with. I mean, John, you obviously saw it happen, and the natural comparison, I don't think it's fair, let's be clear, is going to be made to Brian Harsin at Auburn. But like, why do you think that some of these coaches who haven't coached in the SEC have come in and had some of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, that is the comparison. He's already kind of getting called Husky Harsin.
Unfair, but
by people.
Husky Harsin is a bar. Crazy. I gotta give it to him. Husky Harsin is pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Don't quote me on that one. I'm just telling you what I've seen out there.
Many people are saying.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, and
John writing his notes in the background, trying to come up with headlines, coming up Husky Harsin on his own, blaming it on other people.
I mean, the fact that I didn't use the bum in my story yesterday, I feel very proud of that. I'm saving that one for down the line if he loses in the future. But so here's the thing. There's a couple of things to that. It's a great question, Shahan. One, I remember talking to an SEC AD a couple of years ago, and we were talking about different coaches. And he said they ran some study. They were doing analysis. And part of it was like we ended up deciding that in the SEC especially, the precedents or the stats, whatever, back up that it's better to hire a jerk than a nice guy. And now I thought that was a little extreme, but he started rattling off. He's like, we just decided like, yeah, maybe it's not always like the most fun for us as ADs and administrators to deal with guys who are jerks, but like they have shown an ability to win at a really high level because it takes a maniacal level of dedication to win in the SEC. And I think about guys like Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Steve Sarkisian. I mean, these guys are relentless competitors. They are beating down recruiting trails over and over again. Like these guys want to win at levels that frankly are unhealthy, but that is the level that is expected in the SEC. And I think with Harsin, the one comparison that I do think is especially apropos is that, listen, hiring coaches is such a crapshoot in so many ways, but there are times where hires are made and you think, man, that's outside the box. That's a big swing. And I remember thinking that about Harsin. You look, all right, he had, I think, like an 80% win percentage at Boise State. But it was just like, man, that's like a big move to go to Boise State to Auburn. Like, that's an interesting place. I wonder if he's going to be able to handle that. And when they hired DeBoer, I thought the same thing. Like, Washington to Alabama, that's a big move. I've lived in the state of Alabama for more than a decade. It's a unique place. You have an incredible amount of support and fan interest and all that. But, like, they expect a lot of you, and they will let you know if you're not meeting that. And I think if you're not able to navigate some of the uniqueness of the booster situation and local businesses and things like that, it's going to be challenging for you. Plus all of the outside noise. Like Kalen DeBoer did not have to deal with Paul Feinbaum out in Washington. There's no one out there. There's no Pac-12 version of that. In the SEC, I guarantee you on Monday, Paul's going to be letting it rip. And that's just the challenge and the uniqueness of the SEC. And some guys are built for it and some aren't. And I think one of the most underrated things about Nick Saban was that he handled that for 17 years. I mean, that would break down so many of us, including myself. And the fact that he could hold off on that and keep the fans at bay and keep winning and winning was so impressive. And I think Kalen's struggling right now in that department.
And to John's point earlier about jerks, right? Like jerks don't necessarily create discipline, but like I think
Brian Harsin, a good example.
It can help though. And I think what I took away watching, especially in the fourth quarter of that game when Alabama was trying to come back, is it's the details that really suffered with Alabama. There was a crippling penalty down 7 that extended an FSU drive and led to a touchdown. On the next drive, there was a miscommunication on third down that led to a drop. There was a false start on the next play. Ryan Williams had a drop on that drive and he had several in the game. And it just came down to Alabama not executing when it needed to. I don't necessarily think it's a talent issue for Alabama, although I would like to get into that in a second. But like under Nick Saban, you rarely saw those things happen. He was detail oriented down to the grain of rice on the players' tables every day.
Yeah.
And under Kalen DeBoer, like so often in these big situations, you've seen them struggle. And like this is the second time particularly you've seen them struggle against an offense that has a lot of option principles. Like we saw that big upset against Diego Pavia last year. That comes down to eye discipline on defense and staying in your fits and staying committed in your lanes. And like Alabama did not do a good enough job of that against Vanderbilt. And it did not happen last night or yesterday against Florida State. And I think that's a problem. And I want to touch on the talent thing for a second as well. Like Alabama talked up this offseason like they were feeling really good coming the year. And the way they approached the transfer portal speaks to that. There were very few large-scale additions for them. They were not particularly aggressive in the portal. They basically took the spring portal off in terms of upgrades. They felt very comfortable with where the roster was at. And I think that says a lot about how the staff viewed this team. And if that's the case, like I would question like why they felt that way and how they got to that point. Because if you're going to go out there and play like this week 1 and you didn't make those upgrades, like maybe you're not seeing your own team correctly.
Chris, I think that's a really good point. A couple things that you said there. Let's talk about the eye discipline and the lack thereof that Alabama had yesterday. Take the Micah Danzy touchdown, for instance, right? Gus Malzahn as an offensive coordinator, and we will get to the Florida State side of things a little bit later in the show. Gus was in his bag, right? They run this counter action where they pull these blockers to the right, and then all they do is they just bring Micah Danzy from the right to the left, and they flip the ball behind Tommy Castellanos, and Danzy's out the gate. The long throw down there to Jalen, that was like the 65-yard catch that set up a touchdown. They just motion him back into the core of the formation, did they, to Jalen Lucas, and then he wheels up the sideline, and he gets a massive gain. There were so many, there were seemingly little things that Florida State did to just completely mess with Alabama's eye discipline. They really had them in a blender, Sean.
Yeah, it's such a strange situation, right? Because we're just not used to seeing this from teams like this. And I mean, it's interesting going back to DeBoer's time at Washington and even as an offensive coordinator, because he's always been a very high variance coach. And I mean that in the sense of like the way that they call offense is insane historically, right? Like they are trying to do something crazy almost every single play, almost these like normal precepts that you have about how you structure a game plan. Like you just throw that out the window with Kalen DeBoer because of the way that he does things.
Yeah, but Shahan, wasn't this offense supposed to be better with Ty Simpson? Ty Simpson was not the square peg into the round hole that Jalen Milroe was last year.
No, but so what I was going to say though was because I think that they historically have sold out so much to be high variance, so you hit the highs. I think that when you need to be lower variance, when you are the better team going against teams that are worse, they don't always handle that moment very well. They don't necessarily have, if you want to call them safe game plans, they don't always have sort of this situation where you're going in and you're pounding the rock. And, you know, I know that like the Solid Verbal always used to call it crock potting games, right? Like where you just go in and you put them to bed and you cook them and you look up and it's 42-7. They just haven't done that under Kalen DeBoer. And I think that, that video always goes around with Jonathan Allen and Damian Square, I think it is, doing the like complete psycho sort of pregame speeches. Like, I think that some of this too is like, man, these Alabama players also, like, some of them need to take ownership of this too. Like, especially on that defense side of the ball, you need some freaks to get in there and sort of be like, this is how we do things. Like you do not mess up, because you are going to hear about it not just from Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack, but also from us. And I just don't know that we felt that the same kind of way since Nick Saban led. There hasn't been that same level, at least in my view, of player-led ownership.
Yeah, Shahan, the video that you're referencing, I believe there's a quote in it that's "With Bama, that's what we do."
Yeah, I was gonna say there's not a lot of quotes from that video that we can say on a CBS Sports. We're a family show, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. Richard, I think we have a question, right?
We have a question in the chat that is that's a real humdinger. John, I'll let you take this one. How bold of a prediction would it be for Alabama to bring back Nick Saban in a caretaker role? I think Nick is fine and dandy on television. I think he's having a good time. What do you think of this listener question?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible prediction. I mean, I think the chances of it happening are extremely low, but I mean, the idea of it, I think every Alabama fan would sign up for it right now. I think what's interesting is this is someone who knew Saban, but was talking to him, the other day, and they kind of brought up to me, just like, do you think there's a part of Saban that's like a little happy that it's not going quite as well after he left? And I think he cares about the program, and I think he wants to do it well. But like, his legacy has never been better right now. Like, I think at a certain point you get used to assuming it's always going to be that way under Saban because he had it rolling. And now, I mean, again, I wrote about my column, but it's like he had 4 losses to unranked opponents his entire tenure at Alabama, 3 of which came that first season, taking over from Mike Shula. Kalen DeBoer already has 4 in 14 games. Like, it shows just how incredible of a run that he had at Alabama, that if I'm him, be like, listen, like, things have never been better for me from what I did there. I'm having, like you said, I'm having fun on game day. I'll do my own thing. I don't need to sign back up for that.